My name is Tom Schmitz. My story is M16 magazine pouch versus M16 magazine bandolier. I'll explain later what that all means. First of all, let's start at the beginning. I graduated from high school in 1966. My first real job was at Harley-Davidson in Milwaukee, putting together motorcycles, the Super Glides. I was on top of the world, making a lot of money, figured I'd get a nice car. 6 months later, I get my draft notice. And I'm thinking, oh, hell. So anyways, I figured I didn't want to join the Army and end up being in a rice paddy. So I went down to the Air Force recruiting office and joined up for the Air Force because they said I could be an air traffic controller, and I figured good job, good pay, put a couple of years in, get out and become an air traffic controller. Well, after boot camp, they explained that the air traffic control positions were all filled. I was going to be a security policeman, and that was a second, oh my goodness. So that's what I was, and 6 months later I got my orders to go to Vietnam. The station I was at was Phuket. When you get off the plane, the heat is like a blast furnace heat that hits you in the face. Now there's also the odors. At that time, let's say the sewage system wasn't up to par. Plus, the Vietnamese people use spices that American folks aren't used to. So those two odors and the heat are something that very few people will ever forget. Okay, so we landed in Quy Nhon, which was 30 miles on the coast. So you had to go 30 miles inland to get to Phuket. We went on a bus. And the first thing I noticed is there was chicken wire on the windows. The bus had no air conditioning, so the windows were open, and there's chicken wire. So I asked the guy what the chicken wire was about, and he says, well, because the windows were open, the Viet Cong or the Viet Cong sympathizers would come past on a motor scooter or a bicycle and throw a hand grenade through the window. So they put chicken wire on the windows. But the problem is the Viet Cong are pretty smart people. And what they did is taped fish hooks around the hand grenades. And they hung them on the windows. So the bus driver says, if you see somebody coming alongside the window on a motorcycle or a scooter, let me know. Well, anybody who's ever been in Vietnam knows that about 90% of the people drive scooters or motorcycles. So I just kind of kept my fingers crossed and ended up in Phuket. Now, Phuket has one of the largest contingents of F-16 fighter jets, which means they have a large contingent or a large bomb dump to support those, and they have a large contingent of rescue helicopters for the downed pilots. Now those are 3 targets that the Viet Cong would love to blow up. When I got there, I met a guy named Brian. And Brian told me that don't go on the towers. The outer perimeter of Phuket had big towers, about 50 feet tall. And he said the guys in the towers were like canaries in a coal mine. Now, if you're too young to understand that, that's long before they had electronic devices to check for air in the coal mines. They'd bring down a canary, and when the canary died, they knew that there was bad air there, they had to get out. The same thing in these guys in the tower. If one didn't report every half hour, they knew something was wrong. He suggested that I look into Cobra Flight, which was a unique group of people that protected the outer perimeter. Now, Cobra Flight had like 4 different groups. One was mortar pit crews, who every night would throw harassment and illumination out into the outer perimeter. The second group was APCs, which stood for Armored Personnel Carriers. They looked something like a tank, and the back door would open up, and up to 6 people could deploy from the back of it. The third group was a Tessie. Don't know what Tessie stood for, but what they did is they buried intrusion devices all around the perimeter of the base. And these guys were good. They would monitor those, and they could tell the difference between the heartbeat of a monkey, a snake, a cat, or a human being. And they would relay that information to the people on the sniper ambush team. And I was a member of the sniper ambush team. We did night work only. We'd go out, as soon as it got dark, we'd sit out there at night and look. What would be called today as meet and greets. We'd meet the enemy trying to come into the base and take care of it. Now, one thing about being a night duty is there were some kind of rules, if you will. Let's say you had, everyone had dog tags. Well, at night, those rattling of the dog tags can be heard all over the place. So you tape your dog tags together. Another thing other people might not think about is canteens. We always had our canteens full because a half-empty canteen would make a slushing sound, which again you could hear at night. You didn't want that. Another thing is we always carried extra M16 magazines. We carried them in a pouch on our web belts. The reason we did that is the bandoliers, they were cloth bandoliers with M16 magazines, made a lot of noise at night. It was like a brass band, and you don't want any noise at night, so we never wore the bandoliers. Okay, now I mentioned we did night duty, which meant we slept late in the morning. We'd get up, go out to the bush site we were going to go out that night, and we'd go out to 2 other ones in case somebody was watching us. We wanted to confuse them. And we'd what was called reconnoiter the ambush sites that night to figure out where we'd be, if the worst comes to worst, how to get out of there safely, stuff like that. Okay. So as I mentioned, we slept most of the morning. Well, one morning I got woken up and they said the bomb dump is under attack. And I thought, oh, good God. So I ran to the armory to get my M16 pouches, and they were all out of pouches because I was one of the last guys there. They gave me a bandolier. And I figured, it's daytime. The enemy knows we're coming. We know we're out there. There's no big surprise. Bandolier, that'll work this time only. So I put the bandolier on over my chest like this and went out there. And by the time I got out there, things were almost done. I was in a brief firefight, you know, some rounds coming in, some rounds going out, and then it was over. So it was no big deal. I came back in, and when you come back in from any kind of a firefight, first thing you do is clean your weapon, because the M16 was notorious for getting clogged up. So you clean out the sand, the mud, the dirt, and everything from your M16, and then you clean out your magazines, because if mud or dirt or sand gets in the magazine, it can clog your weapon. Well, I went to take my bandolier off, and I noticed there was a hole in the pouch. So I took it was right about here. So I took the magazine out, and there was a hole in the magazine. I caught a round. That's the only time I've ever worn a bandolier, caught a round right here in the magazine. And that sat around for many years until I decided to donate it to the museum down here, the Vets Museum. So if you ever want to see it, it's at the Vets Museum. Here's a picture of it. And that's pretty much what it is. That's one day I wore a bandolier, and I guess it saved my life. Special thanks probably to Brian, who informed me not going into the towers. I'd like to meet him. When you You're in war, or a lot of other times, the first thing you do is say, I'm from Wisconsin, where are you from? Well, Brian says, I'm from Wisconsin too, a small town called Winchester. And I said, well, I know where Winchester is. At that time, we didn't have expressways. In order to get to Weyauwega and Waupaca, he had to go through Winchester. So I told Brian, I know where that is. I remember the quilt lady. There's a lady that put quilts on her for sale on her front lawn. And he says, yeah, that's my aunt. So here we are, a half a world away, and I run into somebody that I know and now knows me. So yeah, Brian is the one that got me into Cobra Flight. And if you're still around, Brian, good job. And everyone who's been listening to this story, thank you very much.